Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Westside Unitarian Universalist Church. Our welcoming words today from the UUA website, written by Erica A. Hewitt. Welcome to this morning, this day, and this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenges. The Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn about being more human. We are not here because we've figured out life's questions or because we think we have it right. We come here to learn more about being in relationship together, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, and how to create trust and compassion in one another. My name is Chris Edkins, a member of the worship committee, and I will be your worship associate for this service today. We have some announcements that are in your order of service, and I'll just go through them for the benefit of the people who are out there in the YouTube land. Our welcoming congregation renewal team is looking for fresh perspectives and a new voice to join the committee as we continue to ensure that all are welcome here at Westside. The primary function of the committee is to fulfill our responsibilities and requirements set by the UUA to maintain our status as a welcoming congregation and an LGBTQ plus affirming community. Please see Ellen Greenwood, who is here today, or if you're here other weeks, Morgan Ringlespar or Barry Shumpert are also members of that committee and can give you more information. Adult religious exploration. Christian Roots Growing Branches will occur Wednesdays at 6 p.m. on Zoom. Many of us were raised in various Christian faiths, and though we may have expanded beyond some or all of the specific teachings of those traditions, we may still be making peace with that part of our experience. For many of us, there are parts of the Christian tradition that we want to hold on to. Perhaps we deeply believe in God or Goddess, consider ourselves mystical, or love the ritual and traditions. Sometimes we've been wounded by the teaching of traditions which still hold some beauty for us, or we simply feel unable to separate our identities from our past religious teachings. We will have the chance to talk deeply about expanding beyond our Christian roots while still feeling deeply centered in our own spiritual truths. Join us Thursday evenings for Thursday evening conversations. Thursday evening conversations is each week from 6:30 to 8 p.m. This is an ongoing adult religious RE series which meets for discussions on various topics. Each session is standalone and can be joined in at any time. Our topics include those specific to UU values, LGBTQ, racial justice, religious exploration, etc., and more general topics of interest. Westside second Monday lunch, everybody is welcome. Our next lunch will be at 11:30 on February 14th at the Bravo's Italian Kitchen. That's 106 Major Reynolds Place, Knoxville, Tennessee. If you're planning to attend, please contact Judy Burgett, and her phone number is here in the order of service. And there's more information about all of these things in the Wednesday newsletter that Brad sends out, and if you don't receive that, you can email Brad, office@westsideuuc.org. Okay, that concludes our announcements for today. I'm going to signal our movement into sacred time by ringing our Tibetan singing bowl. Our chalice lighting words today are also from the UUA website, written by Jean L. Wallstrom. In this small flame dwell. In this small flame dwell, the beacon light of lanterns guiding travellers home, the warmth of hearth fires tended through the generations, the transforming energy of furnaces and the power and life of our sun. May these blessings, warmth, light, and life-giving energy be kindled in each of us. I also light our candle, which is in token of all the suffering from those of conflicts that are going on around the world and those who are suffering because of prejudice against them in their country or in our country. I'm very pleased to say we have Sandra Thomas to play piano for us today, and Sandra will now play our prelude. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Sandra. So lovely to have that music. Our topic today is fasting, and it was requested by somebody through our Sermon Smorgasbord program that we have, where members of the church can ask us to present on a particular topic. And this was one of those topics. So just to let you know that if you make a suggestion, we do read those and we do follow up on them. And that's what we're going to do today. I have a story for you that introduces our topic. And normally we would have the children come up and gather round, but in this time of COVID, we'll stay in our places, and I'll read the story from here. The story is called The Monkeys Go Fasting, and it's a traditional Indian folk tale. A group of monkeys decided to go on a fast one day. Before we begin, I think we should keep the food with which we will break the fast ready, counseled the old chief monkey. The monkeys nodded their heads in agreement. The youngsters were sent in search of food, and they returned with huge hands of delicious-looking bananas. I think each of us should keep our share of the bananas with us before we begin the fast, so that we don't spend our time distributing them after we break our fast. You can imagine how hungry we'll all be by then, said the chief's wife. The monkeys liked the idea, and they collected their share of the bananas. Why don't we peel one banana and keep it ready to eat? Said one of the youngsters. Yes, let's do that, shouted another monkey. Just looking at the bananas were making him hungry. All right, said the chief monkey, we shall peel the bananas, but under no condition should we eat them. So the monkeys peeled their bananas and carefully kept them ready for eating in the evening. Can I keep the banana in my mouth? I promise not to eat it till the evening, please, a little monkey asked his father. Why don't we all put a banana in our mouth? That way we can chew it immediately when we break the fast, said his father, who had agreed to go on the fast only to seem wise and to fit in. As long as we don't eat it, it should be fine, he added. So the monkeys put the bananas in their mouths. One by one, they eyed each other uncomfortably as they began their fast. As you can imagine, within no time at all, the bananas disappeared down their gullets, and that was the end of their fast. You can see that it's not necessarily easy fasting, and if you put the temptation right in your way, then you're probably not going to make it all the way through. So let that be a lesson to you. We're going to take the offertory before we start the sermon. We haven't yet decided on our Share the Plate partner for this quarter. So keep an eye out for the newsletter. We'll be having our board meeting after the service today, and we're going to be deciding upon our Share the Plate partner then. But our policy is that 25% of any undesignated funds that we collect will go to our Share the Plate partner. So that means any loose cash in the plate you can also write checks or put money in an envelope that goes to designate it for the Share the Plate partner too. So we'll now collect our offertory, and Sandra will play for us. Thank you, Sandra. Thank you, Sandra. First of all, I'd like to start off with a disclaimer. I'm not a medical professional, and I'm not advising you to undertake any changes in your diet without consulting a doctor. If you have any kind of metabolic disorder, it could be extremely dangerous to stop eating. So we would always recommend to people that before they make any changes, drastic changes in their diet, that they consult a medical professional. So I do have some personal experience with fasting, and I'm going to talk about some of the history and background of fasting too. So we all know that fasting involves abstaining from food or possibly drinking for a period of time. But what exactly that means is fairly flexible. So it may be abstaining from all food and drink for a short amount of time, including not drinking water. It may be abstaining from selected foods for a period of time, like the way that Christians, especially Catholics, change their diet during the Lenten period, abstaining from luxury items or not eating meat. It may be, in modern times, just taking liquids, not only water, but fruit juices, the so-called juice fast. And the science tells us that a person can abstain from eating food for maybe as long as 2 months without dying, as long as they get adequate water. And if somebody doesn't eat or drink, then they can survive without dying for maybe as long as 8 to 21 days. But I would definitely not recommend pushing the limits of those. I've never fasted personally for more than 5 days, so that seems like quite a long time to me. But, there are historical precedents when people have been on hunger strike in prison, or when Gandhi was protesting the British occupation of India, where people have really tried pushing the limits of how long they can live without food. So we kind of know from that how long you can actually survive for, but there can be damage to your body if you go for really go to the edge there. So generally we think of fasting as being for spiritual or religious purposes, and of course there is a long history of fasting as a religious practice or a spiritual practice in every culture and every religion throughout the world. It's been seen as a way of doing penance for wrongdoings, a way of gaining spiritual power, or a way of communally expressing the adherence to your religious principles as a group. In Judaism, fasting can be used as a penance for sin, either personally or communally. The most famous communal fast in the Jewish tradition is Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, which involves abstinence from physical pleasure, including eating and drinking. In the Christian Gospels, Jesus goes into the desert and fasts for 40 days and 40 nights to prepare himself for the final trial, including the crucifixion. This biblical story later became the basis for the season of Lent. During Lent, adherents typically give up certain food items rather than going without food entirely. In my childhood days, we typically intended to abstain, say, from chocolate during Lent, but like New Year's resolutions, we were not very true to our intentions. I also understand that traditionally in the Catholic Church you're supposed to abstain from eating meat during Lent. And there's a few funny stories about what can be considered to be meat. You're allowed to eat fish during Lent, and various exceptions have been made over time, such as saying that, well, if maybe fish is not available to you and you need some kind of protein, maybe some other aquatic animal can be considered fish. So beavers have been classified as fish by the Catholic Church, alligators have been classified as fish, puffins, for example, but when we talk about fasting in Islam, of course, what comes to mind is the month of Ramadan. During this time, the faithful take no food or water between the hours of sunrise and sunset, though typically they break their fast after sunset and eat a meal before the sun rises in the morning and drink plenty of fluids in the meantime. As in many religions, fasting is also practiced in Hinduism. In the Hindu religion, fasting is not an obligation, but a moral and spiritual act, where the aim is to purify the body and mind and acquire divine grace. There are different forms of fasting which are more or less strict, more or less difficult to follow, and which vary depending upon personal, family, and community beliefs. In some cases, fasting involves abstaining from one meal in a day, or for meat eaters, maintaining a vegetarian diet for a time. In the time of the Gautama Buddha, there was ascetics who practiced extreme privation of the body, including fasting as a means of weakening the body in order to strengthen the spirit. But one of the Buddha's realizations was that lasting enlightenment could not be achieved that way, since if the ascetic continued on their path, they would die of starvation, or they would eventually have to eat again, returning to a healthy physical state, but losing their spiritual state in the process. Just like communal eating has had spiritual significance around the world and across cultures, abstaining from eating, either individually or a community, is widely considered to have significant spiritual or religious value. I think here in the UU Church, we recognise that there is this tradition of considering whether or not the mind, body and spirit are separate. We have the idea of an embodied theology where we say we are embodied human beings. Our minds and our spirits are not separate from our bodies. But historically, it's been considered that the spirit is separate from the body, and that by weakening the body or depriving the body in some way, or voluntarily accepting the discomfort of physical suffering, whether it be hunger or cold, the spirit can be strengthened, and that's one of the bases for fasting as a religious and spiritual practice. But I think in our more modern times, we're kind of more looking at the health or physical benefits of how fasting can improve our health and well-being, as well as our spiritual well-being through the uniting of our mind, body and spirit. So I'll talk a little bit about the more modern practices of fasting for health reasons and for weight loss. There was an experiment was conducted quite a while ago in which they were testing out toxins and poisons on rats. And they couldn't understand why some of the rats were getting healthier because of the poisons that they were giving them. They were doing better than some of the other rats. And one of the things they realized was that because they'd given all the rats access to this unlimited quantity of food that they could get on demand, the problems that were being caused by eating too much and obesity were worse than the effects of eating the poisons. And sometimes those poisons caused the rats to lose their appetite and therefore made them healthier. And that was kind of the start of this idea that maybe we're causing ourselves problems by having access to all this unlimited food and not limiting our calorific intake. And it's been proven since then, of course, that taking in too many calories can cause us a generalized inflammation that can lead to a greater risk of various diseases, including heart disease and metabolic diseases. So we have a great focus nowadays upon our food intake and dieting for our physical health. Because our minds and bodies are connected, of course, that includes our psychological health as well. The human body is a remarkable organism. Of course, we can take in all this energy from food, and our body has ways of storing it so that we can use it later in times of need or want. There's a couple of different ways that energy can be stored in the body for later use. One is carbohydrates can be stored as glycogen in the liver. And we know that fats can be taken in and stored in specially created cells in our body, fat cells, where that can be taken out and used later. And in the most emergency circumstances, our bodies can even break down our muscle mass and use that as energy, if all else fails. So we have all these different ways of storing energy in our body. And we know that if we take on too much energy and we store a lot of it over time and we never get that opportunity to burn it off and use it, that can cause health problems in the long term. There's various, of course, attempts everybody knows that diets are always being promoted in our society, and various diets have been used by people to lose weight, either for health reasons or for cosmetic reasons, and it doesn't, it's a very difficult situation that we have in our society. We have access to all this wonderful, tasty food, and it's difficult to resist sometimes eating more than is good for us, so then we go on these periods where we try to diet. There's been a certain amount of evidence recently that suggests that maybe abstaining from food completely might be more healthful than trying to reduce our calorific intake over an extended period of time. And some of the research has shown that when we abstain from eating completely, there's chemical changes happening in our body which causes the burning of some of the stored fat and the release of human growth hormone that can help protect the muscle that we have in our bodies from being broken down and used as calories in a way that doesn't necessarily happen when we severely restrict our calorific intake over time. So that's one of the bases for using fasting rather than a reduced calorie diet. The question is, what does it take from an actual practical and scientific point of view to gain those benefits? The practice of intermittent fasting, which has become quite popular nowadays and which my wife has tried, involves kind of like they do in Ramadan, where you eat for a certain period of the day and you have a goodly portion of the day where you don't eat. So that you have a time for your digestive system to rest, and you can use the calories you've intaken and then have a chance to actually use them up when you're not eating. There is some evidence to suggest that might be beneficial. But what we generally think of as being, a more lengthy fast to get those benefits of burning off some of our used up stores of energy involves not eating for, a complete day or maybe several days. I mentioned earlier that we have these different ways of storing energy in our body. We have the glycogen in our liver, which is a way of storing carbohydrates. So that's carbohydrates are our first line of energy usage. We generally tend to use our carbohydrates like immediately when we eat them. Anything that's not eaten can be stored in the liver. And when we stop eating and have to have energy to use for our day-to-day life that we're not immediately taking in, the first place we take it from is that glycogen that's stored in the liver. So that can last us, depending upon how much is stored there, that can last us for several days, typically maybe 3 days. If we don't eat anything at all, just take water for the 3 days, that glycogen gets used up. And at that point, you start then burning some of your fat reserves, or maybe taking some of the protein out of your muscle mass and burning that for energy too. If you fast for that amount of time, you'll notice there's a really clear switchover. You'll start to smell different because the breakdown products of the fat and the protein are quite different from the breakdown products of sugars. Sugar breaks down to water and carbon dioxide with very little side product. The fat and the protein in your muscles breaks down into ketones, and you'll notice that there's a kind of acetone kind of smell on your breath and on your body. So it's easy to tell when you've switched over to that fat burning. So generally people who are looking to go on an extended fast are looking to get to that point where they start breaking down some of that fat in their system and burning it off. So that would be usually the goal, the health goal of an extended fast. And I'll talk a little bit about my personal experience of what it's like to go on a fast like that. So, of course, fasting is both like a physical and a mental challenge. Of course, there's food is available, like our monkeys with the bananas sitting there in their mouths, waiting for when they break their fast. Food is always available to us, so it's very easy to go and eat if we feel the discomfort of hunger. And there may be some people, excuse me, there may be some people in this room who maybe have never experienced the hunger of not eating over the course of several days. So, you know, we're probably all familiar with the sensations that happen in our stomach when we haven't eaten for a normal period between meals. We get like a hollow sensation in the stomach that tells us, you know, our stomach's empty and we're ready to put something more in it. Maybe you're also familiar with the sensation that comes of the blood sugar level dropping in your system, where you maybe, I don't know, it's difficult to describe. Maybe you kind of like feel a little bit strange and weak for a while, or maybe a little dizzy, and you think, oh, wow, I've really got to have something to eat. And my experience is if you actually eat when you're feeling like that, you usually eat too much, because it takes time for that food to kind of get into your stomach and kind of get into your system, and you're feeling that kind of low blood sugar kind of feeling the whole time, and you kind of usually eat too much under those circumstances. If you kind of go past that feeling, it kind of goes away after a short while. You know, your body starts tapping into that glycogen in your liver, and you don't get that low blood sugar feeling anymore for quite a long time. Then you just kind of get the psychological challenge of being like, well, normally I would eat at this time. Now I don't know what to do at 6 o'clock if I'm not making dinner or not sitting down to eat, because the process of preparing food and sitting down to eat it, and maybe communally sharing food, is such a big part of our lives that when you don't have that to do 3 times a day, it kind of makes quite a big gap in your day, where you have to kind of find something else to fill it, you know. I find the best thing to do is maybe go out for a walk and keep busy. They say, you know, keep exercising when you're fasting to help burn up some of that energy. Don't just kind of sit around, and I do find that to be a help. But then there's an obsession of the mind that sets in over the course of when you've missed 1 meal and 2 meals, and you kind of do have a feeling that I should be eating, and the physical sensations are not really the same that you normally associate with hunger. It's more of like, I know I should be eating, but I'm not eating. My experience is that after 2 days, that kind of disappears. You don't feel that way anymore, and it becomes quite natural to not be eating. And my experience is that lasts for the rest of the fast, and the ketosis starts, and you get that kind of feeling. In the few times I've fasted for 4 or 5 days, towards the end of the fast, you do get quite a good feeling of lightness and clarity of mind, and your body feels kind of healthy and light. And I've even had the experience where I think to myself, you know, I'm not really that bothered about starting eating again. You know, there's a reluctance to start eating again, because it's like, I don't want to put this gross stuff back into my body again. But of course, you know, like, you know, you have to. And there's also is like another part of your mind that's like, you know, eating is so pleasurable. I think I would actually quite like to start eating again, even though a part of my mind is telling me, you know, that maybe I wouldn't be that bothered. So when you break your fast, they normally recommend that you take something that's quite light, fruit, for example, rice, you know, something that's fairly easily digested, and don't eat too much. Just start very gently. Don't, you know, pig out on a huge amount of meat or something like that when you break your fast. So I don't know whether I've actually had any kind of spiritual experience as a result of fasting, other than what I talked about is that kind of sense of lightness and clarity of mind. I don't know if maybe you carry on for 2 weeks and you start to experience something different, other bodily sensations, other sensations of the mind, you know, as your body starts to kick in other processes. That's kind of beyond my experience, but that's as far as I've gone, like about 5 days, and it's been long enough for me. I can't really imagine doing a longer fast than that, and you do get a lot of the benefits, I think, health benefits from doing it for that long, you know, if you're able to do that and if you have the right kind of body metabolism and no issues that might cause that. Not everybody's the same, of course. We have a vast array of different diets that people have traditionally had around the world, from people like the Inuit who only eat animal products to other people who are only vegetarian. So I think because of the way that we have evolved over time to adapt to these specific diets, we all react a little bit differently to what we eat and whether we eat or not. I know that Janet, my wife, has a great deal of difficulty not eating for more than about 12 hours, and I have not experienced such a strong reaction when I don't eat. It kind of seems okay to me, you know, it's bearable, but we all, you know, have our own experience. So if you're going to try this fasting, I would recommend, you know, first talk to a medical profession. Start gently so you can try the experience and see if it suits you. And if it does suit you, just try extending it out a little bit more each time until you get to the point where, you know, you feel comfortable in taking that fast. I think it's interesting the way that in some cultures fasting is used as a penance. It almost seems like, you know, that not eating is a punishment. But I think if we take a balanced view, we can see that not eating can be a good, healthful and pleasurable thing to do, not necessarily a way of punishing ourselves. And as Marcus Aurelius said, if we can accept certain discomforts voluntarily, it can be character building for us, whether that's getting in a cold bath like Wim Hof, or perhaps abstaining from food for an amount of time, or exercising maybe when we would rather stay in bed for an extra hour. And that, I think, is where that spiritual growth comes from. It comes from being willing to endure some things for the good of building our own character. That concludes my prepared remarks. So I guess I'll ask if anybody has any questions they'd like to ask before we wrap up. David?
Why did you decide to start fasting the first time?
During the course of my life, I've had some kind of gastric distress, like a chronic gastric distress, like an irritable bowel syndrome. I don't know if it's caused by anxiety, which, you know, I do suffer to a certain extent from anxiety. But I think my original idea was that if I could give my digestive system a bit of a rest, it might help to solve some of those problems. And I have found that that has been the case for me, that it has helped with alleviating those symptoms. Anne?
I don't know if you can describe this. Clarity of mind. What was that like? Clarity of mind.
The question is, what's the clarity of mind that I found that came from fasting? You know, experiences are so difficult to describe and pass on to somebody else. I don't know if if you stay indoors and watch TV in the winter for hour after hour, and you're kind of a little bit sleepy, and you are not doing very much. You get a kind of mental fuzziness that comes over you, that where you don't feel alert, and you feel kind of a little bit sluggish. But if you were then to kind of go outside and take a brisk walk and like clear the cobwebs away from your mind and breathe some fresh air, kind of when you come back you feel sort of energized, and your mind feels like that cotton wool has kind of blown out of it. It's that kind of feeling. Does that make sense? Yeah, kind of. Jerry.
I was wondering if you read anything out of what the scientists have to say about different degrees of fasting effect on the brain and how the brain reacts to different degrees of fasting.
So the question is, do I know anything about how, what science says about how fasting affects the brain? I have to say I do not know that, but I'll do some research and I'll come back and I'll communicate it another time. I have not looked into that. Thank you, Jerry. Jonas.
It would seem to me that the way that fasting got into the religious domain is that it can produce hallucinations, and that's, I guess, one aspect of what you describe as seeming a clarity of mind. But the practice was to maybe go into the desert or whatever, fast, and try to seek some kind of a vision that no doubt was the result of these hallucinations.
Yeah, the question is, like, one of the ways in which religious traditions have used fasting and the idea of having a spiritual experience is to have this altered state of mind, maybe have some kind of visions or hallucinations, which I think if you take it to the extreme, I haven't experienced that, like to have a vision or feel like, God is talking to me or something like that. I've not personally experienced that, but yes, that would be one of the goals, to achieve that kind of altered state of consciousness, similar to taking hallucinogenic drugs, in certain religious ceremonies and things like that, yes.
Of course, peyote and LSD is the quick method of doing that.
Correct, yes. Yeah, things like, hallucinogenic drugs will get you that effect a lot quicker and with probably somewhat less suffering. Yeah. Sorry, Alice?
This is a little aside, maybe, but as I'm listening to this very interesting discussion about how we have the choice to fast or the choice to eat, I'm thinking of all the people in the world that don't have that choice. They don't have anything to eat. And I just am sad for those people that there are so many in that situation, including some of the people still in Afghanistan that maybe we left there and should not have, and wondering what would have happened if they had been able to come over to this country, as perhaps they had been promised at that time. But anyway, just thinking about those people.
Yeah, thank you, Alice. A candle for people who are suffering in the world. Yeah, the comment was that we are very fortunate to have the choice to eat or to fast, and that there are other people in the world who don't have access to food and therefore don't have that choice and are suffering from that. That's very true. Thank you, Alice. Any other? Yes, sir. Sorry, I don't know your name.
Yeah, Dennis Walker. I personally have a lot of experience with fasting, and it's purely lifestyle and have medical issues, and has nothing to do with any kind of deprivation or anything like that. And I've sort of worked into this over time, and it started with weight control for me. You know, I'm in a school right every Mass, and I just don't want to gain a lot of pounds because I just have to carry no pounds to be a nuisance. So that sort of started. And I hate the diet, okay? I live this all the time. I either eating food or not, okay? And once I start eating, I don't want to take a piece of candy and not 2 pieces of candy. And I fast every day. I'm fasting right now. And the clarity of mind, I think back when I used to work for Alcoa, and you know, we'd get up in the morning, I'd have breakfast, and then you go out to lunch and you'd eat. And you come back from lunch, you go, just because you get that every day. And with fasting, for me, it is intermittent fasting every day. I don't eat breakfast, I don't eat lunch. I'll probably eat around 5 o'clock until I go to bed. And I don't really diet heavily when I'm eating. I just eating, you know, because I enjoy eating. And then I go to sleep. And like right now, I'm in a fast. And I do not feel hungry at all. And the clarity of mind, you just don't have that food rush at the end. And you got to, and when you're fasting, there's two states. There's a state of, anytime you have glucose or whatever in your system, you will metabolize that first. And once that's all metabolized, then you'll start to go to ketosis, and you start metabolizing fat. And when you metabolize the fat, you feel fine. Right now, I do not feel hungry at all. Now, during the day, for me, I'll drink black coffee. And if I don't drink black coffee, I'll start to be hungry, whatever that is. But I don't feel a buzz with the coffee. I drink like 5 cups a day. And I don't feel like, you know, I have sugar in my system and you feel it. And I feel fine right now. And that clarity of mind, I feel it every day. And it's just, you're not going to have food in your system without glucose in your system, and you're burning fat.
So for the sake of the people who are out there in YouTube land, I'll kind of give a little bit of a recap. That's Des, who says he practices intermittent fasting, and it gives him a great sense of clarity. And it's good for people who are all or nothing kind of people who like to either eat or not eat, rather than like try and eat a little bit of a meal and then walk away like still hungry. Better to eat what you want and then abstain completely at other times of the day, if you're of that kind of mindset. I'm also of that mindset where if I take some food and it's in front of me, I will eat it all, like an entire bag of gummy bears or the such like. It is also easier for me to abstain completely than try and cut myself off while the banana's still in my mouth. So yeah, thanks for.
I am either on or off.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't feel like eating, but once I have that first bite to eat, I say,
Yeah.
I enjoy eating.
Yeah, thanks for that insight, Des. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, I will wrap things up. I'm going to extinguish our chalice and finish the service for today with these words. These words are Growing Out of Our Comfort by Melissa Jeter. We extinguish this chalice today, but we are illuminated by a faith that allows us to sit and think. In this quiet time, we can reflect in solitude, meditating on love and growing out of our comfort. Though we experience discomfort, we are excited to give birth to a new, just world. Go in peace.